Hi, friends. It's Sister Marla. Back when I lived in River Falls, probably in my early 20s, I signed up to go backpacking in the Rocky Mountains with the Minnesota Baptist Conference. And I had never backpacked before, so I didn't own any equipment. I went down to a gas station where I bought a backpack, a very cheap one, and a sleeping bag, and then went into the Twin Cities to buy a little mess kit and a canteen and a pad for sleeping on. I pored over the list of the things that I was supposed to bring and brought only those items that were on the list. All of them were long sleeve shirts, flannel shirts, a sweatshirt, a raincoat, and pants. As we were backpacking, however, I noticed that I was the only one who really kept to that list, that other people had shorts, or they had short sleeve shirts, or a couple of the gals had tank tops. And the weather did get hot, so I was the only one suffering there in my flannel shirts while they enjoyed sleeveless tops. What I found from that experience was that I was underprepared. I was so attuned to that list that I didn't take into consideration any of the changes that might happen in the weather, any of the changes that might happen in the exertion that we were doing. Well, I decided to backpack again a few years later and going up to Isle Royale, and this time I was not going to be so sparse in my preparations. Actually went the other extreme instead. I packed clothes that I never wore the whole time. We packed the food, including some freeze-dried things, some packaged meals, but we also had a couple of canned goods in there. And when I think back on that now, I think how ridiculous that was. But again, I did not want to be underprepared, and so I erred on the side of being overprepared. My backpack probably weighed about a third to half of what I weighed. It was just overstocked. And by the end of the first day, because it was such a cheap pack, I had worn all the skin off my hips from the exertion of that heavy pack going up and down. What I learned from that is I prepared to the extreme. I carried along items that were not needed, items that were not sensible, items that did not help me out health-wise, did not make the journey any easier. And friends, on this first Sunday of Advent, we're reminded by all of our readings of the importance of being prepared, not being underprepared, not being overly prepared, but being prepared in the ways of the Lord. In fact, in our first reading, Isaiah talks about climbing the mountain that God may instruct us in his ways so that we might walk in his paths. And in walking in those paths with that preparedness, we beat our swords into plowshares, our spears into pruning hooks. We promise that we will not raise against another person. We won't study war anymore. That's the kind of preparedness that Christ is talking about. And our second reading reminds us to get rid of anything that is of darkness, anything like drunkenness or rivalry or lust or jealousy, and instead put on only those things that are light, those things that are goodness, those things that are of Jesus Christ. Our gospel then has very strong words about preparedness. They talk about, Jesus talks about two men working in the field. One will be taken and the other will remain. Two women are grinding. One will be taken and the other left behind. Judged by their preparedness to not just live a life that is pleasing to God, but to walk in his paths in a way that brings about that peace, that brings about that goodness, that brings about that light into our world and into the lives of others. It's a preparedness that reminds us to prepare ourselves armed not with the stuff of life, not burdening ourselves with things that are unnecessary, with things that weigh us down on the journey, with things that might injure us spiritually, physically, emotionally, but to only be prepared with those things that bring us peace, that bring us light, that bring us goodness, that bring peace and light and goodness into the lives of others. That's the preparedness that we're called to be about this Advent season. There's a powerful line in the Psalm for this weekend And it's a prayer that I would like to leave you with, and a prayer that I plan on offering to anybody I encounter throughout this Advent season. Probably a prayer that I will say in my mind, maybe out loud a few times, but a beautiful couple of sentences from the psalm. And that is, "Peace be within you. I will pray for your good." Happy Advent.